Hello everyone, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. My name is Demiglue. My pronouns are she, her, and welcome to the Middle School GSA. As always, we are not actually middle schoolers. The title is just for fun. Please do not DM us like, why are you a minor? Or, oh my god, you're so hot for a middle schooler. Stop DMing news those things. We're probably going to change the title soon because of that reason. I'm joined by my lovely co-host,
Felonious Ferris. Hello everyone. My pronouns are they, them.
and a very special guest, that dang dad.
Hi, it's me, that dang dad, also known as Phil. You can call me Phil. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm thrilled as hell to be here.
So,
Yippee!
I'll cut right to the chase. We'll do comments and stuff at the end this time. Phil, who are you? What do you do on the internet? And what's your sort of claim to fame?
Yeah, I am a Z-list YouTube celebrity. My claim to fame is that a while back in Southern California, I was a police officer for 8 years, a little over 8 years. And after getting out during the, particularly during the George Floyd protests, I really started to study up about police and prison abolition because I was seeing things that shocked even me, even having been a cop in Southern California. In Los Angeles County was the area that I worked. I saw and did a lot of wild stuff, and I was seeing things during the George Floyd protests that were shocking my conscience, that were just so like unfathomable to me. And so I decided to start talking about it on my channel. My channel had originally just been, I was trying to be basically a philosophy tube ripoff. And I didn't want anybody to know I used to be a cop because, everybody hates cops, rightly so. But I decided, during those protests, I should start talking about it because I thought I had some, insights. Why do police behave that way? Why do they act like that? Why did they do that to that protester? Why did they push that guy down? I thought I might be able to maybe clarify or answer some of that. And then, through that, I got hooked up with police and prison abolitionists all over the country and in other countries. And that really kind of became my thing. That's my little niche in the online community. So I try to offer my perspective as a former law enforcement person about why things are the way that they are, things that we might be able to do to change them, and otherwise just sort of trying to get people to stop worshiping cops.
Incredible.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So I guess I'm sorry, Phil, if I didn't make this clear. Tonight's topic is the ACAB movement, the sentiment behind that 4-letter acronym. And I guess all three of us are going to discuss our relationships to said movement. And I guess I just wanted to go around the horn and ask, is that a thing? Around the horn? I don't know.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go around the table, and I guess all three of us could just briefly say what ACAB means to us and how our relationship with that movement, whether we agree with that sentiment, whether or not we are in full support of it, or we have anything to say about it and its historical connotations. So I guess, Felonious Ferris, would you mind starting us off with that?
Oh man, you're gonna put me on the spot right away. Why don't you go
I
first? You go first.
Cool, because I probably have the more controversial opinion here.
Oh.
So I wanted to get the...
Oh, okay. Well, to me, ACAB is more about how many of the laws that the police are mandated to enforce are inherently unethical. Many laws are created specifically for the purpose of mass incarcerating black and brown people, for the purpose of re-enslaving them. And yeah, with our prison system set up the way that it is, with our laws the way that they are, I believe that there is no ethical way to be a police officer in the United States of America. Yeah, I don't believe that police officers as individuals, that like if you have been a police officer at any point in your life, that means that you're a terrible person. That seems a bit silly to me personally, but yeah.
Fair. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, well, I guess you kind of stole the words right out of my mouth. I can't put it any better than that. But ACAB to me does mean that all cops are bastards, in the sense that all cops do participate in a system which is inherently unjust and is inherently destructive to particular communities. And for that reason, I am comfortable with this, endorsing the sentiment of ACAB, but I do disagree with some of its some ACAB sentimental tactics, if that's how you can describe them, such as saying things like all cops are bastards, and yes, that includes your relatives who are cops, and certain things like that. While I agree with those statements on the surface level, I do think it's the idea that we just need to bully everyone into submission regarding anti-cop sentiment, I think is a little silly, goofy,
What,
especially on Twitter.
you mean yelling at people and telling them that you think that they're a terrible person doesn't usually change their mind? That's crazy. That's nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you talking
And
about?
I'm sure a lot of people are going to hear me say that and be like, "Well, of course, Demi Gloom, are attacking a straw man," but I'm really not. There are a lot of people who are kind of a lot of tactics. And don't get me wrong, I completely understand, especially during the George Floyd protests. There were a lot of people who had nothing but raw anger and hatred for those who are participating in law enforcement, and I completely understand it. But I think from a utilitarian standpoint, I think that we're ultimately doing more harm than good by alienating people, and I think it should be more about uniting people.
Yeah.
Phil, is your last name Dad? Can we call you Phil Dad?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Mr. Dad, what is how would you describe your relationship to the ACAB movement, and what does ACAB mean to you?
Yeah, so I actually have a story about the first time I heard that phrase, which was not while I was a cop, believe it or not. I had not heard that particular formulation. I had just left law enforcement. I had moved around a little bit and ended up in Louisville, Kentucky, and was out volunteering at a queer youth fundraiser. We were out on the street doing like a garage sale type of thing, and I saw some graffiti across the way, and it was this kind of had like an X shape, like the old. I don't know if anybody's involved in like the hardcore punk scene, but if you
Oh
remember
yeah,
like
I am.
the X, the hardcore
Yeah.
X or whatever,
Yeah.
it was like that kind of shape, but it was ACAB. And where I used to work in California, I used to work in a pretty gang dominated part of the city, and so I was always studying graffiti to find out who did that, like what was the group responsible for that. So I wanted to look up who this ACAB gang was in Louisville because I'd never heard of them. So I get on my phone and I'm like, all right, what's ACAB? And it's all cops are bastards. And I was like, what? Uh, I was a little shocked at first, but and that was kind of before I had fully, achieved my apotheosis as, anti-cop, ex-cop, or whatever. To me, all cops are bastards is a systemic statement, not a personal statement. That's what I always tell people who are skeptical of it, or they don't like it, or they think, oh, my cousin's a cop, he's nice. It's not about your cousin or my dad or whomever. My dad was a cop also. It's not about any of their individual character per se. It is a systemic statement about the mechanism of law enforcement. And so what it means is if you are an active police officer in the world, you are, as we've said previously, you are enforcing unjust laws. You are enforcing laws that disproportionately harm communities of color, particularly Black communities, particularly disabled communities. I think at this point, I think the last study I read was over 50% of people in prison have some form of disability.
Yeah, that's and I think last time I read it, 49% of people who are killed by the police are disabled in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this, like, the system is rotten, right? Like the laws are rotten, the way that we enforce the laws are rotten, the judicial system is rotten. And so what all cops are bastards mean is that for you to uphold or to conduct this business, even if you're the nicest person in the world, and there were times in my career I was a super nice cop. I was a super funny, fun guy. You wanted me out there. I took your stuff seriously. I took, sexual crime seriously when a lot of cops didn't. I could honestly say many times I was one of the good ones, but that doesn't matter, right? Because I was one of the good ones, and yet I still upheld the system either explicitly or implicitly. Um, and I can tell you, you know, cops love to tell war stories. I can tell you a story that kind of illustrates this point if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was a night my favorite shift to work was weekend graveyards because that was the fun shift where everything wild happened. And so there was one night we were working and there was a report of a like a panhandler bothering people at a kind of an all night burger stand. So we were showing up just to kind of shoo the guy away, just say, hey, get out of here. And the guy was super drunk and he had a little bit of that liquid courage in him and he decided at the burger stand was where he was going to make his last stand for some reason. And he decided to start fighting with us in this little tiny, burger shop. And so we tussled around with him for a little bit. He was drunk and he's not like an MMA guy or anything like that. So we danced around with him for a little bit, got him in handcuffs. I think he got tased, ended up in the back of the car, no big deal. And I was just going to take him for a drunk in public. It's a misdemeanor, it's a ticket. He'd sober up, get released on his way, probably wouldn't even get filed, whatever, just solving a problem for the night. Well, one of our we call them drug interdiction officers or, drug unit, however you want to call it. One of our drug expert officers rolled up because there had been a fight and he decided he was going to conduct a drug abuse. Oh man, what did we call it? Drug abuse analysis, basically. He was going to see if the guy was on something else besides booze. And he did his thing and told me that the guy was high on methamphetamine. I've been in a lot of fights with guys on methamphetamine. It didn't seem consistent with the fight that we had just had. And then he said, "Yeah, I think he's on meth. Tell you what, I'll take him back to the station, and I'll search him real good for you." And I was like, "Okay, this uncharacteristically helpful officer." So we go back to the jail, and I searched this guy. By the way, like I handcuffed him, I searched him for weapons, and I'm pretty thorough. Didn't find anything. We take him to the jail, and the drug officer says, "Hey, let me search him real quick." And I said, "I already did. He's good." And he goes, "I'm going to search him real quick." So he pulled him around a corner, and 5 seconds later, he came back with the guy, sat the guy down, and then he held up a baggie full of a white powder. And he said, "I told you he's on meth." And I looked at this drunk guy's face, and I know when somebody has been caught doing a bad thing. And that was not what this guy's face was. He wasn't making an, crap, I got caught. He was, I can only describe it as a face of pure betrayal or crestfallen desperation. I don't know how to explain it. It really moved me. I'll say it that way. And I looked at the drug officer and I said, "Hey, are you sure? Because I already searched him and I didn't find that. And he's pretty adamant that that's not his thing. Did we maybe make a mistake?" I was sort of trying to give this guy an out to say, "Oh, whoopsie doodle." And the guy looked me straight in the eye and said, "Nope, I found it. And now I'm going to go book it into evidence and write my report on it. Bye." And he left. And I looked around at the other jailers that were there and the other officer that was with me. And I looked all at them and they looked at me and we were like quiet for a minute. And I said, "Are we doing this? Like, are we doing this?" And they all looked at me and they all looked down at their boots. They looked back at me and said, "Well, I didn't see what happened. Did you?" And the other guy said, "No, he took him around a corner. I didn't see what happened." And then they asked me, "Did you see what happened?" And I said, "Well, no, I guess I didn't see what happened." And they said, "So, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? Call him a liar? Are you going to go report him to the chief?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't actually know what happened." And so we all just let this guy get railroaded for meth. I know in my heart of hearts that was planted. Like, I know it. I can't prove it, right? Like, I could not prove it in a court of law. I couldn't prove it to anyone's satisfaction. But I know deep in my bones that we railroaded that dude with planted drugs. And there was nothing I could do about it. Like, and you'd be tempted to say, "Oh, you should have raised a stink. You should have done this." Yeah, and then what? I would have got outed as a narc. Police officers get killed for that, by the way. It's happened before. I was told about it in training. They said, "Hey, if you ever rat on somebody, don't expect backup next time you need help." They're going to take their sweet time and stop for all the stop signs and stop at the red lights. It was basically pounded into me. You don't rat on other cops. So I had no evidence. There was no video footage. It was just my intuition as a cop. And there was nothing I could do about it. Or rather, there was nothing I was willing to do about it. We'll put it that way. And so when I tell you, oh, I was one of the good ones, I was a nice cop, I did all the right things, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, that might have been true on any given call. At the same time, I let this dude go to jail for a felony that he didn't deserve. And I was too cowardly or too practical, however you want to call it. I was not willing to stick my neck out for this guy. And I was much more willing to just keep my career and keep my friends and just keep my mouth shut. And so that's what it means when we say all cops are bastards, because even a nice one, even your dad, even your cousin, even your aunt would have done the exact same thing that I did. Because if she didn't, she might have been murdered or at least run out of law enforcement permanently. And so that's what ACAB means to me.
God damn, that was very
Wow.
powerful. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
It's
It's
Ferris, do you have
really,
anything to say?
I mean, these are
Go on.
things that I've read about and that I've heard people talk about. How as a police officer, you're forced to be complicit in things like this. Otherwise, you're under threat of direct violence or, like you said, not getting backup or just harassment. But I've never heard it directly out of someone's mouth before. And I don't know, it's really, somehow it still feels shocking. But even if I knew logically it was true. But yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately that kind of stuff, it happens all the time, and it happens a lot of times at really low levels. Like we're used to the spectacular issues of like police killing unarmed people or covering up sex crimes or all these different like very spectacular things. But in my career, that kind of like low level, I mean, that kind of like low stakes, that drug charge probably going to get thrown
Mm-hmm.
out. You know what I mean? Like we wasted that guy's weekend. Basically, we hung him up in court. I mean, it's not good. I'm not like justifying it or
Yeah.
minimizing it. What I'm saying is that guy didn't get put away for 30 years for that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we wasted his time. We blew up his life for a little bit. We didn't kill him.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff happens all the time, every shift in every city. These little things, these little escalations, these little. I mean, we had guys that we work with that were like, we would run to get to calls before them because we knew they would turn it into a fight and turn it into a huge ruckus. And so we would rush out to like diffuse situations because we didn't want the paperwork from what these cowboys were going to do out there. And so it's, I think what's so haunting about it for me was how dull it often was, the banality of that kind of evil, the like the paper, I don't know what you call, like the paperwork evil, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just a wasted time here, a wasted thing here, a false ticket there, low level stuff, but it was so common and so boring and so unremarkable. And then when you sit back and you think about it, you're like, that was a pure like miscarriage of justice. Like that was pure oppression. That was pure oppression. And it was so unremarkable. I've forgotten more incidents than I remember. And it bothers me. Like it bothers me how, minor it can feel sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it happens so many times that it just becomes routine. I mean, it's we have a lot of science behind when you feel strong emotion about something that increases memory retention. So you're more likely to remember something when you're super upset about it. But as something happens over and over again, it becomes a routine. Your emotional response is diminished, and your memory of those incidents will diminish with it. But yeah, that's really horrifying.
Yeah, it is. And it's so funny because like everybody, when I'm like, oh, I'm the ex-cop, I'm an abolitionist now. Everybody's like, oh, so so you did the brave thing. You stood tall and you quit and you decided not to be part of it. And I was like, no, 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 no. I met somebody online and moved out of state, go be with a long distance partner, and I couldn't get a cop job in the state that I moved to. So I got out of law enforcement for perfectly boring reasons that had nothing to do with taking a courageous stand. And it wasn't until I would tell people stories about things that I thought were unremarkable or just kind of funny little stories, and people would look at me like, "Oh my God, that's horrible. Oh my God, that's terrible. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that." And I would be like, "Wait, you seem shocked. Why are you shocked?" And it took me so long to like fix my brain from just accepting all of these things that I thought were normal. It took a lot of people turning to me with horrified looks on their faces going, "That's not normal. That wasn't okay." And I know that probably frustrates people that are doing the work of activism, like where you were so morally compromised you didn't know what you were doing is wrong. I don't know how to answer that question. All I can tell you is that it was really shocking to me how shocked other people were for a long time after, until I could sort of get my brain around, what a normal person would think about something like that, and not somebody part of the cult.
Yeah. I was going to say something about a cult mentality.
100%.
Absolutely. It's indoctrination, and essentially a big component of a cult mentality is getting people all wrapped up in that kind of us versus them mindset, tying your emotions to it, and then it prevents people from thinking logically. And yeah.
Or there's even kind of a twisted logic to it too, which was, I worked in the area that I worked was, like I mentioned, there's a lot of gang activity, a lot of drug activity. We were part of the main narcotics corridor of stuff that was coming in from Mexico. It would go through my area to go get distributed out into the jails, out into the communities, whatever. So like we were just part of this kind of crime hotspot. And I don't want to minimize the existence of crime, right? Like crime is real, people get hurt, it's not okay. And so part of being in the cult was like they would indoctrinate you with this, like, when you were rough, when you were heavy-handed, when you were unpleasant, when you ruined people's evenings, you were actually helping because you were convincing them to stop doing crimes, right? Like I remember one time we jammed a car was rolling through town. We jammed them up, and it was like 4 guys I would have said look like gangsters, probably just regular dudes. But for whatever reason, we thought we clocked them as gangsters. And so we pulled them out of the car, and we're just kind of wasting their time, searching, looking for whatever, just kind of fishing. And I remember one of them turned to the other and said, "Man, I knew we shouldn't have driven through here. The cops here are fucking assholes." And I remember being so proud. That's exactly right. You should not have driven through here. We are assholes. Please don't come back. Like, we thought we were doing something good, like by disincentivizing crime, by making you afraid to commit crimes in our town. What's a false ticket here? So in the grand scheme of things, aren't we doing for the greater good? Like, you can convince yourself to do a lot of horrible shit by saying it's for the greater good, right? Like,
Yeah. You have anything to say, Demigloom?
I've been avoiding fangirling this entire time, Phil, but I do watch your videos, and my favorite thing that you emphasize, not my favorite thing, but one of I think the most powerful argumentative pieces of what you do is it doesn't matter whether or not a cop is a good person individually. What matters is that they're participating in this system, which we already talked about. And I guess my question for you is, what do you have to say to people who, like, what would you tell somebody who said, like, my uncle's a cop and he's a great guy, or this person's a cop, or also people who say, if you have a problem with police, why don't you become a cop and have more progressive ideas represented in law enforcement? What would you say to those people who have those kinds of arguments? Because I know that myself and certainly you would disagree with that sort of idea.
Yeah, anytime somebody, I mean, I have kind of a stock response that I give to people, and they say, "Well, my brother's a cop, and he's a really nice guy, and he helps people." And I would say, "Great, he sounds like a great guy." I go, "Let me ask you this: how many times has he narked on a fellow officer that he saw using excessive force?" Is the answer 0? I bet it's 0. And let me tell you something: If any police officer tells me that they have never witnessed another officer using excessive force, I'll call them a liar to their face. We all saw it. Most of us did it, and most of us got away with it because nobody cares about these people. Like the poor people, people that are have drug abuse issues, people that are involved in in the gang life or adjacent to the gang life. Nobody cares what happens to these people in powerful society. So we all got away with it. And so I don't believe any officer just went through their entire career never witnessing somebody violating the law, violating department policy, violating use of force standards. And so my question is always, how many guys has your brother narked on? If the answer is 0, they are part of the bastard problem, right? It just is the way that it is. And people who say, "Oh, you should get back in and change it from the inside," like, again, I have to stress to you, police officers have been murdered for that. They like it happens. LAPD, NYPD, like I know of people who were murdered for whistleblowing. I didn't know them personally, but I know it's happened. And the question every cop has to face at some point in their career is, how much am I willing to give up to protect this drunk loser in a town that I don't live in? What am I willing to sacrifice to see that justice is done properly for this guy? And the answer 99% of the time is I'm not. I'm not going to stick my neck out for this guy. And so and so changing things from the inside, like, yeah, great. Go ahead and try. For one, you will be morally compromised. Like every police officer has to start out as a trainee. If you work for the sheriff's department, you start out in the jails. If you work for a city municipal police officer, police department, you start out as a trainee. When you are in training, you are what's called on probation, which means they can fire you at any time for any reason or no reason. And so you toe the line. You do what you're told. You do what's expected of you. I remember when I was in training one time, there was a guy that led us all on a big police chase, and a couple cops crashed their cars and had to go to the hospital. And so when they finally got this guy in the jail, because I was the trainee, I had to do all the fingerprinting and all the kind of grunt work. And the sergeant came in, and he said, "Hey, Phil, you're still on training, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Great. Why don't you go make a fresh pot of coffee?" And I said, "Oh, that's okay. I already made a fresh pot of coffee. Here it is." And the sergeant turned to me and he said, "Hey, asshole, go in the kitchen and go make a fresh fucking pot of coffee right fucking now." And then he stared at me and I realized, oh. And so as I left to go make another fresh pot of coffee, I heard this suspect getting the shit beat out of him. Like, so that kind of thing is indoctrinated into you from the beginning. Like, you have to be okay with that to even make it off of training. And then you got to do what? 3, 5, 10 years as a beat cop before you can promote to detective or to whatever, maybe to a sergeant, maybe to a field training officer. So you are 10, 15 years into your career before you have any institutional power to change anything. And by then you're compromised. You're in it. Like, nobody's soul survives 15 years and then they just decide to have a change of heart and then clean up the streets. And even if they wanted to, the infrastructure doesn't exist for them to do that. The sergeants aren't going to participate. The lieutenants aren't going to participate. The captains aren't going to participate. The chief is a political position. He didn't give a shit. So I hope I can swear on this channel, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, like, even if you decided you were going to be the one crusader who was going to turn it all around and clean it all up, at best, you will have no institutional support. You will lose all of your. They will run you out of whatever the position that you're in, that you're trying to do that in, and then they will make your life a living hell until you quit or you die. No one's gonna do that. People have tried and they have failed, and I don't want to be like, I hate to be doomer about it and say don't try. If you're a progressive cop who happens to be listening to this and you think you can do it, I guess, but like, you can try. But I just, nothing that I know, and I worked with a lot of other agencies. Like I did trainings with other agencies. I got my use of force certification from other agencies. I went on excursions with other agencies. I knew hundreds of cops from hundreds of agencies. There's not a single agency that I've ever heard of that was doing any better than mine. There's not a single cop that I worked with that was doing better than me, right? Like, we were all in it together. That is the culture of law enforcement. It is upheld from the bottom to the top. And even outside of law enforcement, city councils that hire the chief, again, a political position, they often run on, public safety. And so the city council does not typically have an appetite to hold cops accountable. I mean, look at Jacob Frey in Minneapolis is afraid of the cops. He's afraid of the Minneapolis PD. Look at any of the governors or mayors of New York. Everybody in New York is afraid of NYPD because they are a mafia. They operate like a mafia. They kill like a mafia. They extort like a mafia. Everyone is afraid of these guys. And so you lowly one person with the heart of gold, you're going to fight City Hall. You're going to fight the mafia. You're going to fight all the law and order business people who like having rough cops beating up homeless people, keeping them out of their stores. You're going to fight all of them. I just don't see that happening.
And what would you say to somebody, hypothetically, who's listening to this podcast and hears that, okay, so all cops are bad, this law enforcement thing is not working out, but sees problems such as crime, such as, things that cops are really the only system we have in place to address these problems. These issues, someone's really passionate about these issues and wants to do something about them. What would you tell that person instead of becoming a cop? Sorry, I didn't word that incredibly well. I hope you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're laying down. Yeah, so my time as a cop, I saw awful, like unforgettable, unforgivable, pure evil crime. Like stuff I would never repeat on a podcast or anywhere. Stuff I would never say out loud because it's so disgusting and horrific and traumatic, even to hear about. Like, I'm not trying to be like hyperbolic or whatever. I'm just telling you, I encountered unimaginable criminal evil in my time in law enforcement. So, and I say that to say, so I get it, and yes, I agree. Like, crime is bad. I too want to stop these kinds of harms from happening. I too never want to hear about some of these things ever happening again, and I would do almost anything to stop them, right? Like, so I take crime very seriously because I know how it destroys lives. I know how it destroys communities. And because I take it seriously, I believe that we need to stop looking to police to solve all of these problems. And I think a lot of cops would agree with me. When I was a police officer, I was sent out to such horrific crimes as children refusing to go to school, husbands and wives arguing about dinner, a neighbor spraying another neighbor with a garden hose, like such devious crimes as those. They're sending me with a gun and a rifle and a head full of PTSD from training. That they're sending me to go talk to a kid who doesn't want to go to school. They're sending me to go deal with a car accident, a fender bender. They're sending a heavily armed, heavily indoctrinated cop to go deal with a fender bender. Why? Mental health crises. So many incidents in my career were me being the only person that you could call at midnight on a Saturday night to deal with a mental health crisis. I'm not a mental health worker. I wasn't trained to be a mental health worker. I didn't have trauma-informed training about how to deal with these people. I had paramilitary training that told me that my number one job on every shift was to come home safe at the end of the night and to not worry about who I had to step on to make that happen. That's who they were sending to deal with sensitive, complex, ongoing mental health problems, poverty problems, interpersonal problems. Police are not the right technology to solve that. I can tell you from experience because I never solved it. I was the wrong guy, And so when we talk about, okay, you don't want to abolish the police. Okay, fine. I get that that's a bridge too far. It sounds extreme to people. Fine. How about defunding the police? How about underfunding the police? The point is not to get rid of cops and replace them with nothing, right? The point is not to get rid of cops and then just throw open the prison doors and let chaos reign. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is taking some of the money that police officers are using to buy tanks, helicopters, assault rifles, taking just some of that money and feeding the hungry, giving medicine to people who are sick, giving housing to people who need housing. So many issues that I dealt with in my part of town were due to lack of housing and lack of healthcare. If we'd had just had some investment in healthcare and housing, the crime rate would have like halved in the city that I worked in. Like, I firmly believe that. I don't think that's a utopian vision at all. Like, so much of what I did was just chasing around homeless people, chasing around people with mental illnesses. And for what? To accomplish what? It did nothing. And so, people ask me sometimes, "Oh, you're a police abolitionist. Don't you think won't there someday be a mass shooter? Won't there someday be a terrorist? Won't there someday be something that needs a dynamic armed response?" To which I say, yeah, probably. And I would much rather have those guys on ice until they're needed, and then we can deploy them very tactically and very thoughtfully, instead of taking those guys, getting them all frothed up to use all their shiny toys, and then sending them out to talk to kids who don't want to go to school, sending them out to talk to people who are dealing with crimes of poverty and crimes of survival. Like, let's save Johnny Assault Rifle for like the big weird incidents that happen, once every couple of years, instead of sending them out to every goddamn thing that happens in a city. So, when I talk about abolishing the police, when I talk about defunding the police, what I'm saying is we need to reallocate resources away from punitive carceral mindsets and reallocate them towards public health, public well-being, public thriving, public like happiness. Like, I know it sounds like happy hippie horseshit or whatever, but like the town that I patrolled, people were fucking miserable. And they had every right to be. They were working 3 jobs. Half of them were first generation immigrants. They had no rights. They were working for $5 an hour cleaning toilets. Nobody respected them. Nobody treated them with decency or humanity. Like, we expect people to follow the social contract when we tell them that they're human scum and we won't pay them and we won't afford them any legal protections. Like, why would they? So when I talk about defunding the police, what I'm saying is let's reallocate our resources away from punishing people, away from throwing them in a dark hole where we don't have to think about them, and let's solve their problems. Put food in a hungry belly. Put a person outside inside if they want to be. Right? Like, so many of these, people talk about and I'm sorry, I will just keep rambling, but I'll stop.
Please do.
Please do,
I'll
yeah.
This is an interview.
I'll come up for air in a minute. One of the main things people bring up when I talk about abolishing the police is sexual crimes, right? And rightly so. Like, sex crimes are a huge problem. And I never want to minimize that. And I never want to not take that seriously. But so many sexual crimes happen because victims don't have anywhere to go. They don't have any resources to get away from these fucking people. And so these cycles of violence and these cycles of abuse happen. And it's like, if we just provided free housing to anybody who needed housing, so many people would be able to get away from these abusers before, like, multiple horrific incidents has happened. You know what I mean? Like, so many people would be able to, like, not be there for the crime to happen to them if we would just take care of basic needs. And it is so comparatively cheap to house a person who is unhoused, to feed a hungry person who's hungry. It is so much cheaper to do that than to send out 3 guys with assault rifles working overtime to throw them in the big giant prison that also wastes a bunch of money and doesn't solve any problems. Like, it is so much cheaper to solve these problems, and then you're actually solving them and not just putting them off and putting them off and putting them off until they blow up and get out of control. Like, it is just so much cheaper to do that. And that is my message. Like, maybe you love cops. Maybe you're not a police abolitionist. Maybe you're, a right winger who believes in robust law enforcement and smaller government. Let me tell you, you could pay a lot less taxes if they went towards feeding people instead of oppressing them. It is so much cheaper.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything that you're saying. Something that I'm curious about is, was there a singular moment when you snapped out of it, when you snapped out of the indoctrination, or was it more a process of waking up from it?
Yeah, there's not like, so there were moments in my career that I would say, when I used to go to church, and we would learn about, like, evangelism or whatever, like trying to get people to convert. A lot of times we would say, you don't need to convert them there on the spot. You just need to put a rock in their shoe. You ever get like a pebble in your shoe and it kind of bothers you and you can't, like, it just kind of occupies your thoughts until you get it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, like, these incidents would happen when I was a cop. That would put a rock in my shoe, it put a little pebble in there, and they would kind of rattle around and bother me sometimes. And like, there's like the one I told you about the guy that I'm pretty sure got, drugs planted on him. There's another incident, and I always like choke up when I try to tell the story. Oops, I'm doing it right now. Anyway, there's an
Totally
incident
okay.
with it. There's an incident with a single mom and her 3 kids, and she was in a mental health crisis in the middle of the night on a Saturday. And it took us 2 hours to track down a cousin of a cousin of a cousin who was willing to take in this family. And so it had a happy ending. But I remember being haunted and horrified that this woman had been literally roaming the streets, eating dirt out of people's yards for hours before somebody called. And then even then, if she had shown up, if it had been LASD sheriff showing up, they would have arrested her, put the kids in foster care, blown up this family that was already blown up from unmet needs. And that incident, like, haunted me, because I was like, no one is helping this lady. No one is helping her. She just needs help. She's not a bad person, right? And like, these kids were hungry, you know. Sorry,
It's okay.
fucking shit with kids,
Yeah.
But anyway, like, nobody was helping her, and like, it really bothered me. And like, so like, these things rattled around in my brain. But I got out of law enforcement for boring reasons. I moved to Minnesota initially thinking I was going to get a cop job in Minnesota, but I didn't have a college degree, and everybody in fucking Minnesota has a degree, so I couldn't get a cop job out there. So I ended up going into civilian life, got into, other stuff, and I just sort of slowly transitioned out of that. I gave up the dream of going back into law enforcement. And like I said, but it still seemed normal to me, right? Like, I would have told you, oh, there's good cops, there's bad cops, whatever, it is what it is. And so, like I said, it was what I saw during the George Floyd protests that changed me from, like, police need to be like, I would have told you, yes, police need to be reformed. We need better training. We need better accountability. We need better oversight. Like, I would have told you that even soon out of law enforcement. But it wasn't until what I saw in the footage of the George Floyd protests of police officers just savaging people that didn't that weren't even protesting. The guy in, I believe it was Buffalo, he was going to hand a police officer back the helmet that they had dropped, and they punched him to the ground, and he split his head open on the concrete, and they just stepped over him like he was garbage. And he was trying to help them. And like, they were beating up journalists, they were beating up legal observers, they were beating everybody up. And I remember just thinking, like, holy shit, like, they know the eyes of the world are upon them, and they're beating up legal observers. They're what they did to Linda Tirado, shot her in the eye with a fucking less lethal round, blinded her, and gave her traumatic brain injury. I think she's in hospice right now. Um, for no reason. Like, she was a journalist, and they shot her in the eye to teach journalists a lesson, right? And like, so like, I saw this stuff, and it was like, I got up to some rowdy stuff when I was a cop, right? Like, I got up to some stuff. I had never seen anything like this, like the bloodlust, the bloodthirst, and the total confidence that no repercussions would befall them. Like, that's what I saw in the faces of these cops, just going ham on all these protesters. I saw in their face the awareness that they were untouchable, that no one would do anything, and that they could do whatever they wanted. And like, it really, that was like a splash of ice water to me. That was like, holy shit, there's no reform here, right? Like, there ain't no, people always say, oh, police just need more training. Do you know what training was when I was a cop? The state of California sent us a DVD that said training on dealing with people with mental health issues. And it was like some DVD that was like, some people have mental health issues. Try to listen to them. Try not to beat them up if they have a mental health thing and it's not a crime. And we would all dick around on our phones and not pay attention to the DVD. And then our sergeant would pre-fill in all the answers to the tests. We would sign the tests so that we got credit from the state for having mental health training. That's police training. It's a DVD and a pre-filled out test that your sergeant marks 100% for you. That's police training. There is no training in the world that's going to fix law enforcement.
So it's essentially, you're saying that the mental health training that you did receive was basically you just signing a contract?
Not even a contract. It was just a yes. I watched this DVD. Yeah, but basically, yes. It was basically signing something that says, "Yeah, I saw your dumb DVD," and
that's incredible.
Yeah, that's it. And so, and we had guys and gals that were good at dealing with people with mental, like that had compassion. Like I worked with cops that were compassionate and loving and were not monsters, but they had to individually choose to care about it, right? Like that just had to be in your character that you cared about people, because the system was not arming you to do that. It was not equipping you with the tools to do that. And so what I saw in the George Floyd protests made me realize this system is not reformable. This occupying force in our cities is not going to go quietly. They're not going to just give up and go, okay, we'll give away all of this unimaginable power that we've been given, this necropolitical power over life and death. Yeah, we'll give that up. Yeah, no problem. Do you want to know one of the biggest complaint? Sorry, I'm remembering the big crisis in my department was the time that our workers' comp company came to us and said, "Hey, cops, too many of you are getting hit by cars out on duty, and it's driving up our workers' comp rates. So we are mandating that you have to wear a high-vis vest if you are standing in traffic, and if you do not wear a high-vis vest, we will not pay workers' comp if you get hit by a car." And so the department issued us all a high-vis yellow vest that we were then required to wear if we were standing in the middle of a roadway. You have never in your life heard so much pissing and moaning from a bunch of grown men about having to wear safety equipment in the middle of a roadway. I don't want to wear that dumb. I'm not wearing that shit. Oh my! Like just the whining about having to wear a vest to keep you safe from getting hit by a car. When I was a cop, more police officers died from car accidents than they died from gun incidents. So this was directly addressing the major killer of cops, and none of the cops would do it. What do you think they're going to do when you tell them that they can't be armed on duty except with permission? What are they going to do when you tell them that they are not allowed to use force in certain circumstances? They're going to blow you off, and they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to dare you to do something about it. And as we've seen from Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, as we've seen from Eric Adams in NYPD, as we've seen from whichever clown is in charge of LAPD, as we've seen from all of them, nobody is going to do a goddamn thing to rein in the cops. It's a done deal. So, I hate to be a doomer about it. I hate to be pessimistic, but I'd rather put that out there and say, okay, now then how shall we live, knowing that they are not going to go quietly.
I don't think that that's a doomer mentality at all. I think that that's being realistic and searching for real solutions rather than pretending that we can just slap some extra funding and some extra training and, it'll all fix itself. Yeah, it's a very, very common mentality that I see with a lot of public policy, and it doesn't work very often, surprisingly.
No.
Yeah.
And there are models, believe it or not, I'm sure you all have probably heard of some of these, but I'm not just inventing some utopian vision that has never been tried and tested before. There are programs in several major cities all around the United States. The one I bring up all the time is called Cahoots. It's out in Eugene, Oregon. And the Cahoots program is for certain calls for service, instead of sending a cop, they send a healthcare worker and a social worker. And the program has been wildly successful because when you don't introduce an unaccountable armed zealot into a volatile crisis, it tends to de-escalate, especially if you send somebody with some mental health care and some social work training. It tends to get de-escalated. It tends to chill out, and you tend to arrive at more long-lasting solutions. And so, like the Cahoots program in Oregon, I believe New York has been testing one. I think the Twin Cities has been testing one, but I haven't followed up on it. But we've been testing these programs that show like you don't have to send cops to everything. Like you can send other people with better or different training, and it's cheaper, it's more effective, it keeps the police officers available for actual dynamic, calls for service and crimes that are more appropriate for a police presence. Like it's win-win for almost everybody. I would have killed to have something like the Cahoots program when I was a cop because I hated getting sent. I get sent all the time to these mental health crisis calls that I had no tools for. You try to call a county healthcare worker and like you'd be on hold for an hour and say, "Oh yeah, we don't have anybody that can come help. Sorry." And then you just gotta take them on a 5150 hold or just leave them or whatever. Like I would have loved to have had different resources that were more appropriate for these calls that we were sent on. Like there are programs out there. So I'm not saying we need to like come up with something brand new that no one's ever thought of before. People have thought through these things, and they have put like communities have weighed in on what their community needs to solve some of these problems. So all I'm saying is let's buy a couple less tanks, let's buy a couple less drones, let's buy a couple less shot spotter systems. Let's put that money towards these alternate programs. Let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm interested to hear how would you describe the general kind of personality type of people who go into law enforcement? Because I've often heard them described as a lot of them are the high school bully types that want a free pass to continue being bullies as adults. Would you say that that's true, or could you add more to that?
I've also heard the stereotype. I'm sure you've heard this, Phil. Like they say that like people who've been arrested are like, man, cops are just people who got bullied in school who want to bully people back. So I guess I've heard both ends of that stereotype. So I was wondering if either of those are true at all.
Yeah, I mean, so law enforcement definitely attracts a certain kind of aggro meathead mentality for obvious reasons. Oh, they're going to give me a gun and a race car and let me do whatever I want all day. Like that's very attractive to, a lot of people. I would say, thinking back on my career, I would say about, I don't know, a third were maybe like fully, I almost said fully bully. That's kind of funny. Fun rhyme. We're that kind of meathead bully type. I'd say maybe a third to, I don't know, 40%. I don't know. But I work with a lot of people who were what I would call like true believers, like true patriots. Like, and not that I have any affinity for patriotism, but like, they were people that found law enforcement to be a prestigious career as and don't laugh too hard, public servant. A lot of people considered law enforcement to be public service. And so I knew a lot of people that went in with good intentions and with a good heart, and I knew a ton of cops that hated the corruption, they hated the bullies, they hated the meathead mentality, they hated all that stuff. There's nothing you could do, right? Like even if you worked at a department that was like 80% nice and 20% bullies, the bullies are protected. And and the job warps you over time. Like, so yes, there are people who seek power who go into law enforcement because it gives you power. Like that is definitely real. There are also people who think they're in a position of service who grow very accustomed to being imbued with that power. And power is intoxicating. I mean, there's a reason that I have grown more and more fond of anarchism the older that I get. But believe it or not, it's not like a teenager, only out of touch teens believe in anarchism. Like, I don't know, because I've seen power corrupt a lot of people. Like, I've seen what happens when you give otherwise good people unimaginable power and no accountability. And it's intoxicating and it's seductive. And it's, I try to, when I'm on my channel talking about cop stuff or when I'm on interviews like this, I talk a good game about how, there's there's all these systemic problems and it's really bad. Here's all these bad things that happen. And aren't I so isn't it so good of me to tell to confirm for you all these different things? I'm one of the good ones now that I'm out. And it's like, I gotta be honest with you, I was having a blast for a lot of my career, right? Like that's the shitty thing. Like that's the shitty thing that I carry with me, is that it was a ton of fun. And so many police officers get involved in these things that you would consider horrific because they're bored. Because you can't you cannot give somebody a bunch of shiny toys and a bunch of unimaginable power and then have them sit in a cop car underneath a tree writing traffic tickets all day without them getting super antsy to use all of their toys in training. Like it's just, I don't know, it's just natural. Like you can't, these trainings that we would be in, they get you all frothed up about officer safety. They get you all frothed up about, I worked in a major narcotics trafficking corridor. So everything we talked about was about how around every corner there was a drug dealer and everywhere there was a cartel assassin waiting in the shadows. Like we just got each other all wound up about all kinds of stuff, got each other all paranoid. And so a lot of this bully behavior comes out not just from like the pleasure of a power dynamic, but it also comes out of like this weird fear and paranoia that we get each other all wound up with. And we had an expression in my police academy. One of our instructors who uh, was a former LAPD captain, he said, I want y'all to think about the Olympics. Think about somebody who's an Olympic gymnast. They train their whole lives for one day, one Olympics. They train their whole lives for that one day. That's what law enforcement is, because you never know when it's going to be your Olympics. And I'll tell you about my Olympics. And then he bragged about a story where he snapped the guy's neck in an alley. He's like, that was my Olympics. It was kill or be killed. And like, I don't know how much that story is true, but that's the kind of guys that trained me.
Jesus.
That's the kind of guys that trained me, was, bragged about that kind of stuff. And so, yes, there are bullies, but there's also this like deep sense of fear, and I would say insecurity. So insofar as insecurity is also what motivates many bullies, there's a lot of insecurity in law enforcement because everybody tells you, you never know when the next person is going to pull out that gun and take you away from your family and make your kid an orphan. And like, they just fill your head with all this stuff and it breaks your brain. Like like, I'm not being funny. Like it breaks your brain with like CPTSD and this like cult mentality. They break you down, they build you back up. And so, I don't know how to tell the difference between bullying and insecurity and like just like this deep fear that it's kill or be killed out there. It's all just intermingled in this like hot mess, this nasty soup. And but yeah, it's a bad scene because even the good people, like the good ones who go in with the good intentions, they get I just saw a thread on Blue Sky the other day that was saying like the scary thing about Gaston in Beauty and the Beast is not that he was strong and had a gun. The scary thing about him is that he was well liked in the town. That's what made him so scary, is that people loved him. And everybody in law enforcement loves the fucking bullies because they make you feel safe. They make you feel like you're going home at the end of your shift because this guy is going to take out the trash. And so even if you don't want to be a bully, you keep a bully around you to handle the dirty work, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I see. I'm sorry. I've like, it's hard for me to top that or like follow that.
Yeah.
I do have a few more questions. One being, our target audience is obviously queer people, us being the GSA.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious what your opinion were on if and how. Well, I kind of know your opinion, but I want to ask you if and how policing negatively affects the queer community in particular. That being, the trans community, the gay community, etc.
Yeah, yeah, spoiler alert, it's bad. um, yeah, so I'm bisexual or pansexual or whatever, whatever, myself. And that was something that I grew up super religious and super closeted for a long time. And I've had many, many internal struggles with it over the years, but I'm good now, I guess. But yeah, so I was I knew I had some interesting sexuality within me when I was a police officer, and so I was quite a bit more open and friendly with the queer community in the town that I worked. But yeah, we what I saw a lot was major antagonism towards anybody that was perceived as trans or gender nonconforming. Police officer, like we were talking about, there's that kind of macho meathead culture, and so anytime a bunch of cops run into a bunch of people who are having fun with gender, exploring gender things, doing gender things, it's very important as a police officer that you make sure that you let everybody else know that you're all man, baby, and you're not going to support that. And so yeah, anytime that we encountered trans people out in the community, I mean, it was comments, and it was just nasty, bad jokes and slurs and things like that. And even then, like, I was just like, come on, like, there's no reason for this. They don't deserve that. But there's an incident, like I said, cops love war stories. So my war story about this particular topic was, I got an officer that I worked with, a guy named Ricky. Ricky got called out to a call of a possible assault at a motel, and I was like I mentioned, we do things out of boredom. I happened to be bored at the time. I wasn't up doing anything. I was just kind of cruising around, listening to the radio. So I heard him get sent out to this motel. I happened to be nearby. I thought, oh, I'll pop over and just see what's going on. I'll help him out. And so, not to get too bogged down in police procedure, but typically you have the responding officer is the person who's quote unquote in charge of the call. And so Ricky was in charge of the call, which means he gets to make all the big decisions about what happens, who does what, who goes where, that kind of stuff like that. And me as the backing officer, I'm just there to assist. I'm just there as backup. So I was just going to show up and see what was going on. Ricky shows up, and the victim of this assault is a trans woman. And she kind of intimated, kind of said without saying, that this was an incident of she was engaged in some survival sex work, and her client apparently did not realize that she was trans when he activated her services. And when he discovered that, he assaulted her and left. And so she was the victim of an assault, motivated by that, motivated by her trans status. But Ricky, who's a huge asshole, by the way, Ricky, if you're listening, fuck you. But unlikely that he would be. But Ricky, when he realized that she was trans and realized that she was a sex worker and realized that she wanted to press charges, which would have forced him to take a report, which Ricky denied to take reports. Ricky felt reports were beneath him. To get out of the report, he said, well, actually, because you're a prostitute, if you try to press charges against that guy, I'll arrest you for prostitution. So do you still want to make trouble? And I was standing there when he said that, and I was like, whoa, hold on a sec, hold on. Hey, Ricky, can I talk to you for a sec? And and he was like, yeah, what's going on, bro? And I was like, hey, Ricky, I said, hey, you know what? I'm working on some, I don't know, I can't remember what I made up some lie. I said, hey, you know what, Ricky, I'm working on a training thing, and I'd really love to take this call for training. I'm trying to hone some of my report writing skills, and I've been studying up on like this kind of issue. How about you let me take handle on this, and why don't you go back out and go have, like, just go do whatever, do your thing out there. Let me take over the handle on this call. And it was like, are you sure, bro? Because I'm about to get rid of her, man. I'm gonna get rid of this chick. And I was like, no. I got it. I'll take it from here. Why don't you go have some fun? He was like, oh, okay, thanks, bro. And so he took off, and I gave her the full. I took a report for her. I got as much identifying information about the suspect as I could because he'd run off, and then I actually gave her a ride home because she was far away. He had driven her to this motel. She didn't know where she was, so I gave her a ride back to her apartment. And just did what I could to kind of smooth it over. And the next day at briefing, I said, hey, this incident at the motel, in the state of California, that she was a protected victim. You can't just we can't just blow off reports. So I don't want you guys to get arrested or get sued. So maybe in the future we could just be a little bit nicer and just, just take the report. I just don't want anybody to get sued, So I was trying to do my like diplomat, shaking hands, kissing babies kind of thing. But like that's the kind of stuff we ran into. And so if there was an officer like me who just gave a shit, yeah, we treat people nice. I knew gay cops, I knew trans cops. But yeah, typically police officers were extremely dismissive of trans people, dismissive of anybody that they thought was doing sex work. And if nothing else, just visibly, they wanted to make sure that you knew that they were visibly disgusted by you. They just wanted you to make sure that you didn't get the wrong idea that they thought you were a human being, right? Like, because that could, I mean, well, what's next? I don't want anybody spreading rumors about me, bro. Like there's just this like macho fear of being perceived as gay, being perceived as anything other than manly man. And so anybody, we had gay people in town. By the time I was a cop, gay people were typically treated a little bit better. Gay and lesbian people were typically treated a little bit better. But trans people were still treated just awful by any police officer that I knew.
I think, and as a trans woman, I just want to say, like, I think a big part of the macho transphobia is rooted in misogyny and the idea that all women are kind of sex objects, or that, you only talk to women if you want to fuck them. And I think when a trans woman asserts her gender identity as a woman and a man accepts her as a woman, or a man would see accepting a trans woman as a woman as him asserting that he's attracted to her or that she's a viable sexual partner candidate.
Absolutely,
And
because
yeah,
I'm sure this will come as no shock to anybody listening to this, but police officers are all horny all the time. I don't know what it is about that job that attracts horn dogs, but almost every cop I knew, I would say well over half of every cop I knew was either having sex on duty, cheating on their wife, always trying to score dates on duty. Most of them were not doing it coercively. I'll put it that way. Like most guys I knew were not doing it coercively. Like, hey, have sex with me, or I'm going to arrest you. Most of them would just like, I mean, badge bunnies are a real phenomenon. I don't know if you've heard that term, but badge bunnies are a real phenomenon. There's a lot of people who are very attracted to men in uniform, and there are plenty of men in uniform who are absolutely there to take advantage of that. But police officers are so focused on trying to find people to sleep with in a given shift. And so absolutely, if they were seen to be friendly with a trans woman, like they would be perceived as trying to have sex with her. And that would be a very, very big no-no for the macho meatheads in the department.
Wow.
which you would say that I guess my immediate thought is like when I hear cops trying to pick up girls on duty, that would be I'm imagining that's a huge position of power that they have too, and that sounds very abusive.
It can't. It can be. I actually worked with a cop who got arrested for rape on duty. So
Jesus.
He's in jail at least. Actually, I knew two. Now that I think about it, I know two guys who've been arrested for sexual assault under color of authority. And I got to tell, I mean, most cops are not cool with that. Like for ACAB and all that, like what we talked about. I'll tell you, most cops are way not okay with that. Like we got into the job to stop rapes, not to protect them. That was the one thing that I knew guys got narked on about was sexual assault, because even for a cop, like that was unconscionable to see another cop doing it. So like, small mercies, small comfort, but like I do know guys that got in trouble for doing that. But I'll tell you an example of how it happened because I did it. I got dispatched out one evening to a car crash, single car crash. It was a 25-year-old woman. She was driving, lost control of her car, jumped the curb, and wrecked her car. I gave her a police report for the traffic incident, but we were kind of flirting while we were, while I was taking her car, her traffic collision report. Traffic collision is not a crime. She was not in any trouble. You know what I mean? Like there was no like authority.
Yeah.
I was giving her a report for insurance purposes. we're kind of flirting around, and I said, hey, since your car is damaged, I got a working car. How about I take you out to dinner some night? And she was like, oh, really? Okay. And so like that's how it happens a lot of times. It's just guys, using that access to being around people to shoot their shot. Still not cool, right? Like I'm not saying like that's a cool thing to do, but most of the guys that I knew, that's how it would happen. You kind of flirt around, and just being a cop means you are everywhere in everyone's business all the time. You are bound to run into people that are attracted to you. It happens a lot. So if that makes you feel, 1/10 better about it.
Maybe 1/80th.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
No, I'm kidding. I do have some wrap-up questions, but I was wondering if Ferris had any more questions to get into before we did that.
The questions that, question really is just another wrap-up question. So,
do you want to go?
Well, the big one for me, I guess I have two. The big one of the big ones is for someone who has just been brought up in a cop worshipping culture in America, and they're hearing this from you, and they're just thinking that can't be true. Where would you point them in terms of things that they could read about, more things that they could listen to or watch, just to help inform them of this stuff, to corroborate? I'm not saying I don't believe you. I 100% do, but
yeah, it's interesting. So like when I started my channel, when it first it was Thought Slime who shared my first big police abolition video, and that brought a lot of attention to the channel. And that video definitely escaped Good Vibes Bay and reached a much wider audience than I was expecting. And so I got a large diversity of reactions to that video. But I did hear from several people that were had been in law enforcement, had either gotten out of the academy or had quit law enforcement or whatever, that were like, yeah, bro, like I try to tell people this stuff, they don't believe me. Like, but it's really hard to find cops who will talk about this stuff because it is socially dangerous and it is physically dangerous depending on your circumstances. Like I'm pretty safe. I'm pretty far away from it. I don't live anywhere near where I used to be a cop. I don't even know that anybody that I ever used to work with even knows whatever happened to me or where I ended up. I don't keep in contact with any of them. So like, I'm not terribly worried about it. Like I don't want to get doxxed, but I'm not super worried about it. Like I'm not afraid for my safety or anything like that. But I would say it's pretty rare to find somebody who had similar experiences like me that is willing to like put themselves out there in a way that you would just like automatically trust them. Like I know that's rare and that's tough. They are out there. I would say like one of the first books that I read on the topic of police abolition was Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Y. Davis. And that was before I even considered myself an abolitionist. I had heard the term. I wasn't quite sure what I thought about it. And that was one of the first ones I read. It's super short, easy to digest read, I think. I think that's a pretty good primer. It's a little older, what I mean? So it doesn't have like a ton of like up to date, studies and scholarships and current events and things like that. I mean, but that's a great place to start. Ruth Wilson Gilmore, she's written a ton of books. I think her newest one's called Abolitionist Geography. That's a collection of essays. It's pretty good. I've heard her on podcasts. She was on the Trillbilly Workers Party podcast. If you've heard of that podcast. Great speaker, phenomenal charisma. But people like Angela Davis and Ruth Wilson Gilmore, they can educate you as to like I would say academic side of things. And I don't mean that to sort of like separate it out from real life. I'm not calling it academic as opposed to like real world. I just mean more like they have access to like the studies, the scholarship, the the ethnographic studies of things like that. They can help kind of contextualize things for you. Alex Vitale wrote a book. I think can't remember which one I can't remember if he's the one that wrote "Who Do You Protect, Who Do You Serve." Um, but he's another person that wrote a great, book. Writes books and things on that. I guess I would say like so. Anyway, like those are like academic, quote unquote theory books or whatever. You could Sheila Mbembe, Necropolitics, a theory book. Michel Foucault, Crime and Punish. No, Discipline and Punish by Michel Foucault, a theory book. Oh yeah, you can read all the theory books. Pros and cons. Honestly, I mean, it's hard because what I want to say, I'll tell you what I want to say candidly is if you watched the footage of the George Floyd protests and that didn't shock you to your core, if that didn't shock your conscience, I don't know what will. Like, I just don't know what will wake you up if you could watch months and months and months of sustained police brutality in every city in the United States, in every corner of the United States, and even in other countries. If you could watch all of that and not think that there's a huge problem, I don't know what to say. I don't know what I can tell you because I mean, like that, like feast your eyes on what is happening out there, and it hasn't gotten better. Like, it was that old quote: the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Like, apologies to Dr. King, that's not true. It doesn't. The arc of law enforcement is not bending towards justice. It is worse than when I was in. Like, that's all I can tell you. It is worse. It is worse than when I was in. And it was pretty bad when I was in. And so, like, I think the thing that I didn't do when I was a cop, the thing that I didn't do when I was a 20-year-old right-wing conservative Christian, the thing that I didn't do was I didn't listen. I did not listen to people. And I'm not talking about academics and I'm not talking about intellectuals. I didn't listen to my neighbors. I didn't listen to people that weren't my friends. I didn't listen to people who had on the margins. I didn't listen to people in poverty. I didn't listen to people who were experiencing criminalization. I didn't listen to them. They were screaming everything that I've been telling you, everything that I've been saying. They've been screaming it for 100 years longer than I have, so much more powerfully than I can. I just wasn't listening to them. I didn't believe them, or I didn't feel like I needed to listen to them. I didn't feel like that they knew what they were talking about, or maybe I thought they were biased. Why should I have to listen to that? Of course you think that, I had all these excuses, all these little mental shortcuts that meant I didn't have to listen to these people. So if you're curious about what I'm saying, if you are intrigued by the things that I'm saying, but you're not really sure, go listen to those people. Go listen to the activists in your community. Go participate. Go just hear them out because they have been telling you for years, for decades, that this stuff is happening. And is the big crime of the United States. I mean, it is the big crime of racism and colonialism and ableism. It is the big crime that we have this class of people who are screaming for help and nobody cares and nobody's listening. That's all I can say is like you have to open your heart. Like you have to listen. And you have to listen to them because they will tell you how to fix it. Right? Like I'm a white guy. I'm 41. I own a home. I have a nice job. I live in a nice neighborhood. Everything's going great for me. Right? Like, don't listen to me. I can't tell you how to fix shit because everything worked out for me. Listen to the people who are screaming for help. They will tell you how to fix it. They will tell you what they need. Right? Like, and that's why I don't like to people come after abolitionists sometimes like, oh, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do? Like they want you to have a fully formed 20-point plan that you can execute on day one as a police abolitionist. And it doesn't work that way because every community needs something different. The community that I patrolled was predominantly Hispanic, first and second generation immigrant, largely undocumented. They have an entirely different set of needs, although some that overlap, but an entirely different set of needs and cultural issues than a predominantly black community in Atlanta or a predominantly white community in poverty in Appalachia, right? Like these communities all have different needs. They've all been exploited and abused in different ways. They will tell you what they need. They will tell you how to fix it. You just gotta listen. And I wish I had like a better, oh, read this book and read this essay and then you'll get it. But it doesn't work that way. And people don't change their minds that way. Like, so all I can do is just beg you, beg you, beg you. Please listen to people that you're not usually accustomed to listening to. You might be surprised what they can reveal to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that that's a perfectly good answer. And I'd just like to add that so cognitive dissonance is when you feel discomfort because a behavior of yours doesn't align with a belief. And that discomfort and that oftentimes guilt can prevent someone from changing their mind, from seeing a new perspective, from sitting down and listening, because it's the listening and it's that understanding that causes the dissonance in the first place, that causes that discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also, something that I say constantly is a key component of critical thinking is humility. It's the humility to be able to sit down and say, you know what, I was wrong, and I'm going to integrate this new information into my existing worldview, or just flat out, I was wrong about everything. And I would first of all like to commend you. I think it takes a tremendous amount of humility and courage to be able to, first of all, sit and admit all of this. And, well, second of all, to have gotten it out of it in the first place, to have surpassed that cognitive dissonance. And, just thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. Like, you saying that, it makes me feel conflicted in a certain way because, like, I can't point. Like, it's tempting to like want to say like, I did that, right? I did this thing. I showed great fortitude and it's like I don't know if I did that. I don't know why. I don't know why I turned out the way that I did. I wish I did because it's scary to think that I might not have, right? Like, it's scary to think that if the dice had broken a different way, I might still be in that career. Like, I almost got hired as a sheriff in Stillwater, Minnesota. I was in the final interview and I beefed it. And but there's another world very, very close to this one where I'm back at it. I'm back in uniform and I'm back doing the same shit I was doing. And it's very, very uncomfortable for me to think like, wow, this thing that's so important and so defining for me today is that might not have been me if things had shaken out differently. But I think one thing that you said that maybe more towards like not a call to action, but like, I know, maybe a point of hope. I don't know. There was an incident that happened on duty that, or not an incident, but an interaction that I had on duty with a fellow officer. We were out on some call for service, whatever. I don't remember what it was. And the person that we were talking to, we had run their license to see if they had warrants for their arrest. And they didn't have warrants for their arrest. But when I was looking at their file just to see if we had any other contacts with them, I noticed that they had moved from like a certain street in the neighborhood to a different apartment around the block, to a different apartment around the block, to a different apartment around the block. They had stayed in this same area for like, I don't know, 10 years or whatever. And they just kept moving to different places in this exact same neighborhood. And at the time I had been on for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years and thought I knew everything. And the area that we patrolled was what you would call a bad part of town. Poverty-stricken, gangsters, crime, poverty everywhere. And I was out with this person was a Hispanic person. They were an immigrant from Mexico. And my officer was a Hispanic officer. My partner was a Hispanic officer. And I turned to him after this call and I said, "Can you believe this person just keeps moving into around this same neighborhood? Like, this part of town's a shithole. Why haven't they left?" Like, why haven't they moved literally anywhere else? Like, why would you stay here? This place sucks. And this officer turned to me and he said, well, you don't get it because you're white. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, you don't get it because you grew up in the United States and you don't understand what this person's experience is. And I said, well, how so? And they said, well, they came here from Mexico, right? They left everything they knew. They left the country of their birth. They left the country that speaks their language. They left all their friends and family, and they migrated here. And they put down roots here in this neighborhood because it was all they could afford. Maybe they had a contact or a job here, but they put down roots here after they left behind everything. Of course they're going to stay. They lost their home once already. Why would they lose their home again? Like, this is their home. They live here and they want to make a life here. So that's why they stay. And I remember like being just gobsmacked. Like, I had never thought of that before. And that guy was absolutely right. I could not relate to that experience because I grew up rich and white and well off and taken care of and had all my needs met, and I had never wanted for anything and I had never struggled for anything. I had no idea what it was like to be an immigrant. And that really like affected me when that cop said that to me. And like that changed how I treated people on the job. And so like, you know, I don't say that to say, oh, great, cops are all going to fix themselves if they all just work with this one guy. But like, you know, that I don't know, like there are people out there who you trust who could maybe help clarify these things for you. Like I guess what I'm saying is like there are voices out there that can break through the noise, that can break through the cognitive dissonance. Like, and so I don't know, I guess if you're listening to this and you're somebody who can speak with authority on these matters, you might be surprised at what your friends will hear you out on, I guess I would say. Like, you might be surprised, you might plant a rock in someone else's shoe down the road that will change the course of their life. You just never know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Ferris, do you have any more questions for Phil?
Well, the other one is, I mean, it's kind of a big one. But where do we go from here? What is the answer to these problems? And I mean, it's quite broad, and I'm aware of that, but I'm just wondering what your first thoughts would be.
Well, I definitely have the answer that's going to solve everything, but I have to put my kid to bed. So unfortunately,
Got you.
No, I really do have to go put my daughter to bed.
Absolutely.
I mean, where do we go from here? I don't know. Like I said, I would research, depending on where people live. Like I said, there's that Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon. I think there's similar programs. I would like, if this is intriguing to you and you want to know where do we start, I might start looking at some of these programs that cities are trying out as pilot programs and seeing if you can get involved or seeing if you can support that in some way, or seeing, even if nothing else, maybe you can promote that to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family. Maybe you can say, hey, look at I just heard about this great outfit. And here's all these great things that they're doing. I think maybe you can, there's a quote that I picked up from, I think, criticalresistance.org. I don't know who wrote it. Unfortunately, I wish I knew the name of the person who wrote this post, but they said, it may be more useful to think about what we want to build than what we want to destroy. So I would encourage people, maybe you don't necessarily need to start focusing on getting rid of cops. Start focusing on what would you build that would take the place of a job a cop is being called to do now. So like in the Cahoots program, they sent out a mental health worker to somebody in a mental health crisis. Great. If there's a problem with people committing crimes of survival in your town, like for food or for shelter, maybe think about how can I help provide food or shelter to people and eliminate the need for a police officer to come intervene in the situation. Like, think about what you want to build. Think about what needs to be there that can take the place of a police role. And then we can just start shuffling things away. Maybe police don't need to go to traffic accidents. Maybe we can just send a scribe. I mean, all we did was take a report, like just send somebody who's good at taking reports. We don't need to send a guy with CPTSD and a gun to deal with a fender bender. Like, that's something we can do, and that's very achievable. And any police officer would love for you to do that, because cops hated taking traffic reports. They were long and they were boring and they were no fun. So like any cop in the world would support you replacing their need to take a traffic collision report. Is that something we can have happen in our city? I don't know. But like that's where I would start. Where do we start? Think about what you want to build. Think about what is positive and what will fill a need. And then like let's work outward from there.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, and pals, that was That Dang Dad. Phil, thank you so much for coming on the show and offering your words of authority on the topic and your firsthand experiences. This was a very valuable perspective to the show, and I hope our audience will enjoy and learn from your appearance. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
And we'll put your YouTube channel in the description and all of that. So
cool. I appreciate y'all having me on. I appreciate the chance getting to talk. It was fun.
All right. Thank you so much, Phil.
Yep. Have a great night. Be safe.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, Felodius Ferris. Do you want to quickly skim through the comment section?
Sure.
Are we good or are we too tired?
Whatever. Let's do it.
Okay.
Might as well.
All right. Do you want to do it or should I do it?
You do it.
All right. I'm not going to read every single comment because we did get a lot, but just because a lot of people commented multiple times, but everyone who commented will get a response tonight. So, let's go chronological. Melatonin Lord 8329 says, "Yay!" Clapping emoji. Did not expect the good news today. Thank you. I don't remember you commenting in the past. So did B for real 13420 said finally. Thanks you both of you for commenting and enthusiasm for the show coming back. I didn't know you were fans of the show in the first place, so
thank you so much.
It's good to know that. It's good to know that when we get views, there are people that are actually listening and paying attention to the show, and not just people, clicking and clicking off immediately. It makes me happy to know that people are actually listening.
And also, thank you for saying something. It makes me happy.
Me too. Sawyer186 says, "I'm honestly surprised how well structured the podcast is. The MoCast and Riley podcast is awful." This is true. We are so much better than the MoCast or the Riley cast or the Issue Crew. So much better.
Wow, I didn't know that your dog Sawyer was listening to all these podcasts.
I know. Yeah, my dog's name is Sawyer, everybody, in case you were wondering. So thank you, Sawyer, for commenting. Periwinkle says, "In my high school, GSA stood for Gay Straight Alliance. Look less gender forward." Yeah, they started. They used to stand for Gay Straight Alliance, where we're from too, right?
Yeah.
You had Gay Straight Alliances in middle school. Yeah. Yeah, they changed it to Gender Sexuality Alliance where we are. I don't know if they changed it everywhere, but I'm pretty sure they did. Brat Buftractor. I'm really sorry I butchered that. First of all, thanks for reading my comment. To correct whatever was wrong with my username back then, YouTube added some random numbers to it way back when I used it, which has been changed now. Probably pretty visible, I guess. Definitely no further motive with the numbers or whatever. Seriously. Also, I'm very glad you guys are back. The episode was very enjoyable as always. So that was the person who last time we read their comment had 1488 in their username. No. Apparently, YouTube just auto-generated 1488
so funny.
onto their username. So they're not a white supremacist.
I'm so glad that you're not a Nazi. Yay!
Yeah, thank you for not being a Nazi. Centipede's anime stuff says 3 minutes in and we're already talking about pedophiles. It's like you guys never left. This is so true.
Oh God, I'm so.
We do
sorry.
tend to talk about racism and pedophilia a lot on this show.
They're big problems, okay?
Yeah,
big problems.
Spice Chai, who is Squeebo, says, "I don't have shit to say on vigilantes." Crying emoji. Well, you better come up with some shit.
I don't know
because we're doing it next week.
I thought that they had stuff to say.
Me too. I did think. I thought I mistook their enthusiasm for authority.
Oh God.
So yeah,
this episode's gonna suck.
No, I'll make it good.
Thank you.
Nyan Relathatep. I'm sorry, your guys' names are hard to pronounce. Says The Prophecy. True. Crimson 2000 says, "Yay! Steamboat Art, thank you for drawing me multiple times for free, by the way, Steamboat Art. The fan art is very appreciated." Says, "All the way back with a heart emoticon." User with a bunch of numbers and letters says, "I think you should keep the MSGSA initials, but make it stand for something besides middle school, like Mobile Suit Gundam GSA, or Miss GSA, or Mega Sega Genesis Soul Alliance, something, I don't know." They also said they want more GSA PSAs in the future, and it should be a recurring segment like when Sonic the Hedgehog used to do PSAs at the end of the cartoon. I'll consider more GSA PSAs.
I love that.
Ava Mod Dev, I know who you are, by the way, Ava Mod Dev. You're not slick. Says, will you ever get Jelly on an episode? I miss him from the issue crew. And also, if you do a name change, I suggest the Drama Club because oftentimes drama kids are queer, so it kind of makes sense with your current vibe. I would be okay with calling it the Drama Club, but at the same time, that would have no search engine optimization. Right now, you can Google Middle School GSA podcast or look up Middle School GSA on YouTube, and there's some things about regular middle school GSAs in general, but for the most part, it's all of our stuff. So we've really cornered the market on the title. But if we did Drama Club, we would not pop up in search results, unfortunately. So we can't do that. My apologies. B from Undertale. B, who's done a bunch of art for this show, by the way, says, wow, this Spice Chai 9717 character sure does comment a lot. They do. Squeebo does comment a lot. And Glascore, who's that German guy that we talked to in VC for a while, says, I felt a disturbance of the forest. I'm here to hear discussion. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
How do you feel like this episode went, Ferris?
I really liked it. I think it was great.
I think it was really good.
He carried, obviously.
Yeah. We could have said a lot more. Or maybe we couldn't have. I don't know. But yeah. But it was definitely an interview. And I think it was pretty productive. I think we asked pretty good questions.
Yeah.
And he definitely gave us a lot more than we needed, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Offered a lot of very good insight. And it's really good to get first-person perspectives. So if you or your friend or somebody who has access to at least a decent quality microphone has a story to tell, first-hand experience related to a topic related to social justice, queerness, war, anything, they can get where you're welcome to come on the show and talk about it. We're happy to tell other people, or happy to let other people tell their stories, and because we know we can't speak for everybody, and we can't talk about all topics with authority.
And
we should talk about queerness with authority.
Where should they hit us up, Demigloom?
Send us a email. We need to change this email, but right now you know what? I'm just gonna say, send me an email, demigloom@gmail.com. Don't contact the show email. Oh, somebody's calling me. Don't contact the show email. Send an email to not middle school. demigloom@gmail.com. That's DEMIGLOOM. Or DM me on Twitter @demigloom. Or Discord @demigloom. I'm @demigloom pretty much everywhere. Just reach out to me if you want to get on the show. Or leave a comment down below. Yeah. Was that supposed to be a segue into plugs?
Yeah.
Did I botch it? My bad.
No, you did a good job. That was fun.
Well, I just said where you could find me.
Yeah.
Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Demigloom. You know that I've debated Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles?
Wow.
Did you know that I've done that? And it was great for my mental health. So please go check it out on my YouTube channel. Just look up Demigloom, DEMIGLOOM, and that's me. I'm Demigloom. Go check out my channel, please. Ferris, where can our listeners find you?
I'm at Felonious Ferris in places. Discord. Talk to me on Discord. I will answer sometime in the next century. I can't promise that it will be prompt, but it will make me happy if you do. So do it.
If your question or statement is interesting, I'll bring it to Ferris's attention too.
Yeah. And the footage from when I debated Michael Knowles is on my YouTube channel, and I still haven't rewatched it because it makes me anxious to think about. But you can watch it. I won't be upset about that. Yeah.
Amazing. And also check out That Dang Dad, Phil, who we had on the episode. His YouTube channel is incredible. If you enjoyed his voice and his perspective, I highly recommend you check out his channel. He has 60,000 subscribers now. That's a lot more than he did when I first invited him on the show a century ago.
Yeah, we're just helping out small channels by, promoting
small
them.
Channels, yeah. Indeed. So he doesn't really need a shout out from us, but in case you haven't heard of him, go check him out. I can confidently say he's my favorite left-leaning YouTuber. I avoided fangirling the whole podcast, but I love Phil's content. It's really, really, really good. It's really restorative and constructive, unlike other leftist YouTubers who I will not name. But yeah, do you have anything else to say, Ferris?
Nope.
You satisfied? Because I'm satisfied.
I'm happy.
All right. Bye-bye.
99.